All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this community conversation on the Michigan Library in Every School bills. We're really excited to host a really passionate group of educators and librarians and advocates and students in this space to discuss these bills that are up for consideration in Michigan right now. As we go through today, we're going to have time to introduce ourselves. We'll talk about through and through reads and the why we're here and why we wanted to host this conversation. Then we'll get to our community conversation and have some questions and answers at the end, and then we'll have a closing to bring us back to a call to action, what we're going to do next. All right. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We're going to introduce our panel. I'll start by just a quick introduction of myself. Hi, I'm Joy Lyman. I am the Michigan Education Policy Fellow at Through and Through Reads this year, and I also am a teacher and a lead instructional coach in schools across Southeast Michigan. So I am really excited to be bringing that lens to our conversation today and to hear from all of our amazing panelists. Um, we'll start with hearing from, we'll go in order of what we see on the screen. So we'll hear from Kathy Lester, who's the advocacy co-chair, past president, 2014 of the Michigan Association of School Librarians. We'll hear from Brian Peck, who's a school librarian and Spanish teacher at UPrep in Detroit. We'll hear from Karen Lemons, who was a retired librarian in DPSCD. Mary Jo Vortkamp, who's a children's librarian and manager at the Detroit Public Library, Jefferson Branch. And then we have two awesome students on the line, Noah and Leah Vaughn, who are joining us from UPA High School. So we'll go down the line. Kathy, start us off. Introduce yourself and what brings you here today.
Hi, I'm Kathy Lester, and as Joy said, I'm a past president and advocacy co-chair for the Michigan Association of School Librarians, and I've been working on these bills with legislators for quite some time, and I'm really passionate about it. As a school librarian, I've seen what a great school library can bring to the students and staff and the whole community, the whole school community. So I'd love to see that brought to all of our students in Michigan. Brian's next.
Hello, my name is Brian Peck, and I am a school librarian at UPrep High School. I'm also the Spanish teacher here, or a Spanish teacher, and that's where I started my journey in DPS 11 years ago. And I became passionate about making sure that every school has a library, because most of them do not, especially in the city. And so that was a dream, and Wayne State made that possible by having their pilot program for teachers to earn their library media specialist endorsement. So I was able to earn my endorsement there, and my principal and I developed a project-based learning class to establish a library here at UPA. And you can see behind me, we now have a library. We earned a grant from the state of Michigan. And so hopefully our program can be an inspiration to other schools to reestablish or establish a library. And the two students who are on the line today, they're just patrons of the library, and they've been volunteering as well. And there's a host of students that have been our librarians. So thank you for them to being on here, and thanks for the opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone, and I pray that everyone is doing well. My name is Karen Lemons. I'm a retired school librarian / teacher with Detroit Public Schools, and I am very passionate and very interested about this particular bill and this particular topic, because I was one of the few school librarians left in the Detroit Public School system. And as Brian mentioned, it should be available to every school, particularly Detroit Public Schools, which is the largest school district in Michigan, that every student in the Detroit Public School District should have access to a functioning school library, especially since Detroit Public Schools received that $94.4 million literacy settlement.
Hello, my name is Noah Vaughn, and I'm a student at UPrep. One of the impacts that the UPrep library is having is it's getting the students a lot more involved in the library because most of the library is student-led run, and Mr. Peck is the one who is bringing us together to make his vision come true.
Hi, I'm going to jump in here. I'm Mary Jo Bortkamp. I'm a children's librarian and manager of the Franklin branch of the Detroit Public Library over here on the east side. And thank you for having us. This is such an important topic. School libraries are so important. And Leah, do you need to?
Hello, my name is Leah Vaughn, and I'm a senior at UPrep. The impact the library has on me at my school is that it really brought back my desire to read again. I know that I hadn't been reading for a long time, but because the library is there, I feel like I have a lot more accessibility to books that really interest me, and it really just ignited that flame again.
Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. I appreciated hearing what brings you all here today. I also want to take a quick second to shout out my sister, who is a public librarian at our community library, and she's one of my inspirations for advocating for school libraries as well, because they both play a really important part in our literacy community. All right, to introduce a little bit about 313 Reads and why we are so passionate about libraries is because we are passionate about literacy. We are Detroit's Literacy Coalition, and we work as a collective impact coalition with a bunch of organizations across our community to ensure that all of the people who serve our families in Detroit have equitable access to evidence-based and culturally sustaining literacy practices and programs, data assessment, and resources in order to support grade level reading, literacy equity, and literacy justice for our children, families, and community. A couple of the things that are key levers that we focus on as an organization are acting as co-conspirators for equity and justice, which these bills that we're going to discuss really do get into this idea of how can we create equitable and just circumstances when it comes to library access. And then also, like I said, that culturally sustaining literacy practices. We know that libraries and library programs are proven to have an impact on student literacy. Okay, so thinking about that, one of the missions that's really important to us right now as a collective impact organization is access to books. And I wanted to highlight this book desert map that really shows the access to books in our community is an issue that we really are focused on. And we actually at 313 Reads right now have an initiative called Books in the D, where we're bringing 60,000 books to community organizations, including some school libraries and local libraries across Southeast Michigan. So this and other things like these bills that we're going to discuss have the possibility to impact the access to books in our community. Additionally, I just wanted to make a connection between these bills and the larger literacy crisis that we are encountering right now as a nation. Michigan is statistically not doing what we would like it to be doing for our students when it comes to literacy. Right now, well, I should say 2023, the most recent year, only 28% of our fourth grade students in Michigan are reading proficiently at grade level, with huge equity gaps when it comes to historically marginalized groups. And in addition, Michigan ranks 46th in the country when it comes to school library staffing. And it also ranks 43rd in the nation for fourth grade reading scores. So when we look at those parallels, this is not a standalone issue. Libraries and literacy work really closely together, and we can see the ways that both are impacting each other for our students in this state right now. Okay, so I'm going to take it to our speakers, and we're going to hear from everyone on this call right now about a few different questions, and to kind of bring their expertise and their knowledge to light around these bills so we can better understand the context that they're coming to us, and what we can do to support, to raise our voices, to advocate for equitable access to school libraries. We're going to start with a question for Karen. What is the history of school libraries in Detroit and the surrounding region? Tell us a little bit about this so we can understand why these bills might be important right now.
Oh boy. Okay, I had to write down some notes. Okay, so when I was hired way back in 1996 with Detroit Public Schools, there was a shortage of school librarians. And so Detroit Public Schools was extremely interested in hiring as many school librarians. At that time, Detroit Public School had almost 200 schools, had roughly about close to 200,000 students. For the most part, I do believe that most of the middle schools had a school librarian, and certainly all of the high schools had 2 school librarians according to the accreditation. The North Central accreditation. In elementary, it kind of varied depending on the principal. I was blessed and honored and humbled to start in the elementary school, and that was an interesting experience. I'll share that at another point in time since you want me to keep with the history. Okay, so in 1999, a couple of things happened. Engler decided to, with the help of Archer, decide to have a state appointed board because Detroit Public Schools was experiencing not only declining enrollment, but there are also the low test scores in MEP, and there was a low graduation rate. And when that started a lot of other it was like a snowball. It snowballed into other things, particularly declining financial resources, also more declining enrollment because now students were leaving the schools, and charter schools were opening up, and so charter schools became very popular in Detroit, and a lot of students were leaving there. In addition, there was some unemployment, so parents and families were going where they can get employed. So during that time, so again, as I was saying, then in 2009, it really became more evident that the test scores were not increasing, the enrollment was steady declining, and the graduation rate was still low. So Granholm appointed Robert Bobb as our first emergency manager, and he closed quite a few schools, quite a few. Then in 2011, the state came up with the state education achievement to try to address the achievement rate for students. That proved to be a disaster, but that also opened up another opportunity that also gave us another emergency manager. And Roy Roberts, who in the school that I was in, I had transferred to Detroit School of Arts. He wanted to make that self-governing. That was also a failure, but that's another story. Then in 2013, Jack Martin became the emergency manager. And I will say this about Jack Martin, because I asked him specifically about school libraries. He was the only one that seemed to be extremely knowledgeable about it, but he also told me that there was not any funding to support school libraries. And then in 2015, we had the infamous Darnell Early. If any of you remember Darnell Early, he was connected with the Flint water crisis, and he resigned to step down. And then in 2016, we had Stephen Rhodes, who was a retired judge, but he was not necessarily an emergency manager per se. He was one who was trying to transition Detroit Public Schools out of state control. So what did all that do? All of those emergency managers who were supposedly trying to get our budget and our finances in order actually increased the deficit to make it worse, because of course they had salaries, they had benefits, they had their team who also had salaries and benefits. So that increased the budget deficit. That also limited the resources. And that also did not necessarily make Detroit look very good in terms of education. And a lot of families were questioning whether or not, okay, Detroit can adequately educate with this. And then, of course, the schools closing gave folks other options to choose charter schools or other schools close to where they live or where they work. And so that's kind of like and it certainly impacted school libraries because, of course, some of the school librarians were, some of them were retiring. And so they did not bother. So Detroit Public Schools did not hire any school librarians. And then some of the principals who chose not to keep the school library open convincingly convinced some of the school librarians to become classroom teachers, which of course caused more of them to want to retire because they said no, they do not want to go back into the classroom. Me, I was already in the classroom, so it wasn't an issue, but I was also blessed and fortunate. And I say that because all of the schools where I worked, they wanted a school library open. And even if I operated as a teacher, they wanted that school library open. So they worked very hard to keep me on their payroll to make sure that I would be at least working in the library in some capacity and time and also teach classes. Okay. How much time?
Thank you so much.
5 minutes. I was trying to rush through it.
Yeah, you hit on a lot of important points. Does anyone else from our panel want to add anything on when it comes to this, the history of school libraries in our area? Okay, we'll go to the next question. Thank you so much again, Karen. And as we go, if there's more thoughts that come up, we can continue to add those in. Okay, thinking about what are some of the differences between a school and a community library and why we need both, I'd love to hear from Mary Jo Vortkamp because both are very important, but I think there's some important differences to acknowledge as well.
So one of the big differences is that in a lot of schools, when they do have a school library, they're rotating every class through that. Every kid in that building from possibly preschool on up is exposed to libraries and choosing their own books and the way the library works and whatever curriculum that the school and librarian have put together about libraries and information. It's an amazing opportunity for young people to do that and do that when they're young and to do it on a regular basis. Nobody has to drive them there. Nobody has to take time out of their day to figure out when something's open. And they are also learning that the librarian is a community helper and is more than willing to help them find information and get books for them and work for them. So that is an amazing opportunity that our children in Detroit are not getting anymore. And when it worked, it was amazing. And then they also quite often feel ownership of the library and reading and literature and books because it's their school library and it's their place. And when it works out well, it is amazing to see. I've been around long enough to have actually visited DPSCD school libraries. I've been invited in as a guest speaker, and it was amazing. The community library is amazing in its own way. Obviously, we have broader hours so that we're there after school and on Saturdays and sometimes Sundays so that, families can come visit after school and out of school times. We also can offer usually a slightly wider variety of materials. Everything doesn't have to be linked to the curriculum. That's nice. Also, we work really hard to get people in the door. So we're always trying to do fun and exciting things like our summer reading club to get people to come visit. So that's a couple of the differences, but to have that great start of a school library and be able to transfer that over to a public library is a beautiful thing that our public libraries are missing out on at the moment. And those students are just missing out on an amazing opportunity to go out and pick books they love and read them and meet their school librarian. And I miss that.
Thank you so much, Mary Jo. I appreciate you highlighting the ways that we can partner together, school libraries and community libraries. I see some questions and comments appearing in our feed, so thank you, everyone. Can keep contributing those. I'm going to spotlight one. Actually, we're going to loop back to Karen for a minute with this question. Because I think that you were kind of getting at this, but we didn't get a chance to fully answer it. And I think also maybe Kathy might be able to lend some insight. So Karen, do you know how many school librarians there are today in DPSCD?
At the time of my retirement, which was last year, I thought there was one other person beside me. Let me say a certified school librarian. There was one other person, because there are some people, there may be some teachers who are in school libraries. They may or may not be certified. I can't comment on that. But there was one other person who I knew for a fact that was a school librarian. So it was two. I'm not sure she is still there, and I'm no longer there. So I do not know. I want to say zero. I actually do. And there may be teachers or other staff members who are operating the library.
Thanks, Karen. That seems to be what I was able to find out too. Kathy, do you want to add on to that at all?
Yeah, I can say that the Department of Ed keeps statistics on not whether a school has a school library or not, but the staffing. And currently, in the latest update that I have from the MDE statistics, it says 0 certified school librarians in Detroit public schools. So yeah, I would confer with that. And then across the state, we broadly have, I think the most recent statistic is 49% of our schools do not have any staff in a library at all. So it's not just an issue for Detroit Public Schools. It's a more broader issue, and brings us to that 46th in the nation statistic, right? That's why we are basically lower than other states.
Thank you. I also wanted to just spotlight one of our audience members, Roger, who is also a student at University Prep, shared, kind of going off of what Mary Jo said. Sometimes it's hard to get a ride to libraries, but getting to school every day is a little bit easier, and it gives them an opportunity to help out in the library and get community service as well. Thank you very much, Roger.
I'd like to add to that.
Go ahead, Noah.
It is really a struggle for most people to even go to the library. So the fact that schools are now trying to open libraries, or should try to open a library, it makes a huge difference for anyone who wants to try and read or try to start to read.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. Okay. I am going to go to our next question. So our next question is around what is actually in these bills that we came together to talk about today. There's 3 bills that we're talking about, and Kathy is going to give us a little bit more information on what is in the bills, what might be missing from the bills. So let's hear a little bit more.
Okay, so the 3 bills they've been introduced in the Senate by Senator Camilleri and Senator Baer. And the 3 bills are, the first one, SB 741, I would call the school library bill. It's asking all schools to have a school library, which is in a centralized location and provides both print and electronic resources to support independent reading, learning for enrichment, as well as school curriculum. And then the next bill, SB 742, is, I would call the school librarian bill, It's requiring a tiered staffing level of certified school librarians depending on the size of the school. Less than a school size of less than 300 has part-time. Between 300 to 1,500 students, one full-time school librarian, and then 1,500 and above would be two full-time. And then small districts can request waivers. And the school librarian in the bill is defined as being a certified teacher with the ND certified teaching certificate, and that they will work collaboratively to support literacy, integrate information, technology, and research skills into the curriculum. So we're also, besides just providing access to books, we're teaching a lot of literacy skills as well. And then the third bill, I guess I would call the full access bill. It's if the certified school librarian is not available, the principal will or other administrator will appoint someone else to keep the school library open when that school librarian isn't available. For instance, if they're out sick, and they can hire a sub to keep the library open while the librarian is out. And then my thoughts about what is not in the bills. Currently, the bills are not paired necessarily with any funding, but Senator Camilleri, who is also the chair of the K-12 School Aid Appropriations Committee, currently has in the proposed Senate budget $25 million to basically go for school libraries, both in terms of for paying for funding, towards staffing and materials. So I think that is hopefully where we'll be heading to keep some sort of funding set aside for this. I do feel like the legislature also believes that there is some amount of, every year the funding has been increased for schools, trying to meet the School Finance Research Collaborative funding model. And within that funding model, it had a school librarian at every school. So as well as the way that the Every Student Succeed Act reads, which is federal funding, Title I, Title II, and Title IV funds can also be used for school libraries. So we're hoping that with all of those different funding sources that there should be funding.
Thanks, Kathy. Is there any other context that we should know about when it comes to these bills? They have been introduced. This is the third time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if there's anything we should know about how they might have changed and what are the potential for them being passed this time around versus in previous iterations.
Well, I do feel like in previous, Senator Camilleri has been involved, with each time of those bills being introduced. And he was a teacher in a Detroit charter school, and I believe had access to a school librarian in his high school, in his college, and used the library and really got support from school librarians. And then he went into his teaching role, and he didn't have all the resources that he needed to teach. So he asked, okay, where's the library? I can get help from them. And that school did not have a library. So he has been very passionate about this issue. And in the past, when I can say the Republicans were in control, they would not even let the bills come to a hearing in the Education Committee. And this time, Senator Polanki, who's the chair of the Senate Education Committee, happens to also be a co-sponsor on the bills. And so we did have a hearing on the bills. But I do see that there may be some changes to the current language if they move forward and get passed. And one of the possible changes would be the length of time to implement this. Currently, the timeline for implementing it is pretty short. And I feel like school districts will need time to, adapt to this, to ramp up, to find staff. And we also need more certified school librarians across the state. Because there were so few positions available, it's kind of a chicken and egg problem where people were not adding that certification for a while. And we see that increasing lately, but we still obviously will have a shortage, and we'll need to keep pushing that and finding ways to help teachers add that certification for school libraries.
Thanks, Kathy. We're going to go next to talking a little bit more about what impact these bills could have on the school libraries and librarians or potential librarians that are in our communities. So I'd love to hear from Brian Peck, the UPA librarian, about what are some things that excite you about these bills, and then are there any constraints that you feel like school districts might face when it comes to these bills?
Thank you. So I am a librarian at this school. I'm 20% a librarian and 80% a Spanish teacher, which I think kind of highlights the challenge of a principal in creating a librarian and the staffing. So I've been trying to get a library at all the schools that I've worked at. I worked at Osborne for 7 years on the east side. And, I think that principals struggle to find the staffing. I mean, well, first of all, not a lot of people have the certification. So I think these bills really set the bar very high to institutionalize the need for a library in every school. So they would have to go to their staff to maybe encourage people to go get the endorsement or to hire people who already have the endorsement. So that really excites me that schools that don't have an initiative right now, that the principal would then need to trigger that initiative. All of the bills, I have them right here. I've been going through them. They have really great guidelines. So our program, we started this year from scratch. We're a newer school. We started in 2003. So there were books around, but we really had to start this space from scratch. And so I think, and we're incomplete. So even reading these bills, I'm like, oh, we still need to do this. We still need to do this. We don't have a staff member in here all the time because I'm in here only 20% of the time. The need has already been established. Lots of kids come in, they ask, can I come to the library? When is the library open? And we're doing the best that we can, but it's really only open during lunch and after school, and only 1 hour out of our 6. So I think 743, the bill about making sure that there's supervision and hiring a staff member to be in there the whole time, I think would really encourage my principal to make that happen. I'm in fact going to be proposing that to him in the coming week. Some of the constraints, I think that let's just imagine if this were to pass right now, I know that the 2025, 2026 gives us a couple years, but I think it would have to really, I think it would be really, really challenging for them to find the people. So I think I would like to see maybe a solidification of the partnership with Wayne State's program and maybe other universities and make it easier for teachers to get these. So maybe some funding for them to get the endorsement. I think that there may need to be more coordination with the boards of all these school districts and the central staff, the superintendents, to really plan and figure out how this could work. The funding, $25 million, if you divide that by $50,000, which is the amount of money that we have had this year, that's about 500 schools. So that could be, 500 mini grants to get schools that don't have libraries started. So the funding, I think, will be the huge game changer for schools. Enrollment's going down in a lot of districts, and so I think it's going to be a challenge. But I don't think that we should stop trying. So that's.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, anyone else on the call, do you have anything that excites you about these bills, or that you see as maybe a constraint or a limitation that we might face if they do pass?
I do have one more thing to add. More
Go
so
ahead.
opportunity. So there are a lot of positions being created to help with literacy. We have academic interventionists, reading interventionists. And I think maybe if we kind of reframe, librarians or these positions to maybe have those positions maybe start to encompass being a librarian, maybe encouraging those people to become librarians. So I'm hoping that principals don't feel like this is a total impossible thing to do, that I think that there can be some new creative ways to make it happen and get students involved, which is what's really been our process. We have 15 students that are the librarians, and together they have made this what it is. So hopefully they can consider that.
Absolutely. Any other thoughts about things that excite you about these bills, or opportunities they might provide, as well as anything that you see as maybe being a barrier?
Right now, I feel like, I think Karen hit on this a little bit, that when we had accreditation process, the accreditation process did require at least certain levels of schools to have school librarians. And when that accreditation process changed, and it changed around the time of No Child Left Behind with more focus on testing, is when that accreditation process like kind of went away. And it was, I think around 2004, 2001, I can't remember the exact year, but it was well before the recession. So we saw school librarians going down at that time, even before there were money issues. And it had to do with that requirement. And so now what I see happening is principals or administrators that really don't understand what they're missing when they don't have a school librarian, making these local control decisions on closing a school library. And they've done that even though funding has increased. It's happened like in the last 2 years where they've done it. And that impacts that school and those students long term. So I feel like the bill like this, which sets a standard, will then not allow that inequity to happen. So what most excites me about this is trying to bring that equity for all of our students. And it may take time and it may take a lot of work, but we have to start somewhere. So that's why I'm excited about the possibility of the initial $25 million funding for that. I also know of a particular school district where all of their the principals get to make that decision. And so in all of their elementary schools, one principal decided not to staff the school library. So out of, say, maybe, I forget how many, 10 elementary schools in that district, only one of them does not have an open school library. And I just don't understand how their school board or our state can allow that sort of inequity to happen. So that's what I'm excited about, is the possibility of more equity and standards.
Thanks for highlighting that, Kathy. I saw Karen also. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Yes, I want to echo what Brian said, especially in terms of staffing, because I too was more of a teacher than I was a school librarian, and the library was open during lunchtime. But I also reflect on my elementary experience, and I remember reading tons of books to these students and how they just like grabbed them and they wanted me to read them to again, because I was selecting books that interest them, that engage them. And I would ask questions that would promote literacy, engage vocabulary, and phonics sounds and things of that nature. And even in high school, I started establishing relationships with students, finding out what they like to read. And some of them did tell me they didn't like to read. But I says, okay, what interests you? And trying to find materials and resources that interest them. And this bill would certainly give the possibility of that happening, as opposed to a reading program that you hope will increase literacy, hope that it will develop critical thinking skills, hope that it will help them pass or become proficient with the necessary tests. But if you have good resources and certainly books that people and children want to read, literacy happens. It happens. And that love of learning and that love of reading will continue to happen even beyond the K-12 education.
Absolutely. That's powerful. Thank you for highlighting that. I'm gonna highlight also a couple comments we've been getting in our Facebook feed. So the reason why I actually chose this as one of my passion projects as an advocate for education is because I was obsessed with being in the school library when I was a kid. I was always there, I was always checking out books. But when I became a teacher, I have never worked at a school that actually had a functioning school library in the entire time of my career. And so there's some experiences like that being highlighted in the comments as well. When kids have access, they love it. They wanna be there just like, many of us on this call probably wanted to be in those library spaces when we were growing up, but our students right now aren't really being exposed to that, and also a lot of educators don't always realize what's missing. I know, like, I didn't know as a teacher all the things that a librarian could do to support me because I never had a librarian to collaborate with. So that's one of the things that excites me about these bills is that potential to bring that excitement back, to bring that collaboration back, to bring an extra set of hands when it comes to literacy, especially when right now literacy isn't looking so great in the state. I'm going to turn it over now to some thoughts from the students that we have both in our audience and in our um, in our actual group right now that's ready to speak with us. So I'd love to hear from you all. What are your perspective on school libraries? Why are they important to you? What are you excited about or worried about when it comes to passing these bills? We can start with hearing from Noah and then Leah, and then I will highlight some comments from students in our audience as well.
One of the benefits, in my opinion, is mainly how even if you don't like reading as a kid, you can really learn that you like to read later, but you just don't like to read what most teachers try to get you to read, which is a thing that I see quite a bit around me, to where the teachers don't really pick the most interesting books, but they do pick the books that are centered towards what they're talking about, which I understand they have to do that, which I feel a library is able to change and allow them to pick whatever book that they would like. And another thing is people destroying the books at the library. There is no real way to avoid that, but if they are taught to keep the books in more better condition, I feel like it would change this from happening a lot more.
Thanks, Noah. I wonder, Mr. Peck, can you address what are some things that we can do as people who are working to support our libraries to make sure that the books are protected and safe?
Well, I think I'd rather a book be destroyed by a student by wear and tear than be in a box in a closet. The schools that I've worked at all have amazing educators, amazing administrators, but without a librarian, books end up in closets. They end up mismanaged or unused or never opened. So I love your comment, Noah, about making sure that we're taking care of the books. I'm enjoying seeing the books, our new books, get a little bit worn. A lot of our manga is getting worn. And I think, to his point, kids are starting to think about, okay, how can we make sure that we're taking care of things? What's our policy going to be? I'd rather deal with those problems than not having access to anything at all. I put on our Instagram, like, what's worse than a book ban? Books in boxes. That's essentially banning books, in a way. So I'm just happy that kids are checking them out. Over 30% of our kids have come on their own to check out books. And it's been very informal so far, but I'm really excited about kids who I'm already seeing their stamina increase and their curiosity.
If I may, I want to add one quick comment. I was often worried about, lost books, destroyed books, but I am going to tell you, I really hadn't had that much of an issue, but I will tell you, some students told me, especially with senior checkout, I had students tell me, Miss Lemons, I'm going to pay you for the books that I have taken because I am going to keep those books. I love reading them. So I'm just going to pay you. What is the cost? They're just going to pay me so that you can get another copy, but I am keeping the book that I checked out. If somebody tells you that, it's like, okay, just pay me for the book. Because if that book meant that much to you, have it. Go for it. I love it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Leah, what about you?
What I feel that the library really brings is that it really brings a sense of community. In my opinion, it brings a lot of students together. Like, I've been talking to students at my school, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to the library later today at lunch to go check out a book. I'm just like, that's so cool. Like, I want to check out the library too. I remember what my friend sent me a picture of a funny scene in a book, and I'm like, that's really funny. I have to check that book out later. So it really just brings like the school, I think, closer together, because people go up there for lunch all the time just to read or just to talk to other people about books that are in the library and stuff like that. And I just feel like that's really just sweet. And then obstacles, I believe, I think it's just like funding, I guess. And I believe, because as like Roger said, it's really like the library took a really long time to like really get it to how it is at our school. And then not only that, even before they're done setting up, people are already trying to check out books. So it's really about time management and then funding.
Yeah, thank you so much for highlighting those things. Speaking of Roger, I'm going to highlight another thing that Roger said in our Facebook comments. Roger said that they're really excited about the impact that libraries can have on people, giving people the opportunity to tap into emotions and new perspectives that they never tapped into or thought of. This is some powerful stuff. This could change a lot of people's minds and change people's lives if their perspectives on life were skewed based off what they've gone through in their lives by showing them different ways to go about things and live life. Thank you so much, Roger. I appreciate hearing from all of you students. You have some very wise words to share with this group. Okay, I'm seeing a bunch of other things coming in, comments and questions. Let me see. One more thing from Roger. Also, libraries help because it helps with test scores, giving me new literacy skills, help me learn new words that they haven't seen before, words and things that you don't learn or see in school unless you see them in books. That new perspective. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm going to highlight a few other comments as we go through, but we're going to take a minute now to go to our call to action. So I'm going to be posting everything here on our pages following this live, but also I wanted to share with you some of the resources that you might find useful if you want to continue learning and engaging in this topic. So, specifically, Kathy has compiled some amazing resources, including you'll see this letter that you can QR code. You can take a picture with your phone and navigate to the site if you're interested in signing on to support these bills. And then you can also explore what the bills contain, read them for yourselves, find ways to talk to your representative or your senator. And also, if you're interested in advocating for any other bills that are passing or that are in the process of being decided upon right now, there's some important bills about literacy for all, which is about the science of reading that are working on going through our legislator as we speak. And I highly suggest you check out those resources as well because they're really tied in. Literacy is supported by both things that happen in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Okay, so we're going to go to our question and answer time. For those of you who are engaging with our live, feel free to put any questions you might have for us in the comments and we will try our best to answer them. I'm going to highlight a couple comments that we're getting from the audience now. So, some sharing about experiences when it comes to books and libraries, students getting excited about book talks and wanting to get the book right away, getting addicted to reading and wanting to hear this for all students across Michigan. Um, this idea of another option to get staffing, um, a public library being contracted by the local school library functioning part-time. I'm curious if anyone on the call has ever like seen this happen and work or at least be supportive.
I guess I just have to point out that although it might be an okay stopgap, I feel like it really, again, does not provide that equity to our students. School librarians being there in the school makes a huge difference. And also, we're teachers, we're certified teachers, so we have that knowledge of the curriculum in the school, knowledge of student development, so that we're actually supporting our schools in a different way than a public library supports their schools. And I do want to point out that, I worked in a school district where they did have a school librarian in every school. And what a huge difference that meant in what we could do for the students. We were teaching research classes. We were teaching how to find information, evaluate information, and use that information critically. We were teaching digital citizenship skills, how to use the internet responsibly, safely. We were teaching how to integrate technology into lessons and things like that. Where in other districts where they might have just, one person for the whole district or one person who's in only an hour or so in the library, there's no way for you to possibly do all of those things. So that's again why these bills are trying to get us to that point where the school librarian can really do all of the things that the job is meant to be.
Thank you, Kathy. Anyone else want to add anything in there? I noticed, like, speaking of all those things that libraries do, one of our commenters mentioned that libraries and librarians also support with career readiness, helping students explore career options and learn career readiness skills. So that's another thing we hadn't really highlighted yet. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for highlighting that. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to our previous slide with these resources. Again, I wanted to highlight this doesn't have to be the last time you think about this or engage with this topic. So definitely consider continuing to engage, learning more, advocating if you feel compelled, and thinking about what do you want these bills to do for our students? Do you want to advocate for anything to be added to them? Do you want to advocate for them as is? Learn more and feel free to reach out to us at 313 Reads as we are continuing to discuss this topic and do what we can to build coalition around literacy equity in our community. um, I'm going to go to our closing and we'll have an opportunity for everyone on our panel to share any closing thoughts as well. We'd love for everyone in our audience to feel free to drop in the chat anything you feel empowered by or empowered to do after this community conversation. And I also just wanted to re-highlight that our literacy coalition is right now spearheading this Books in the D project, which is bringing 60,000 books to Metro Detroit area youth, including school libraries and local libraries and a lot of other organizations. So super exciting. We're bringing these books to our community and hopefully it will be a support as we continue to bring more access to books. All right, any closing thoughts from our panelists? Anything you want to leave us with?
I can just say real quickly that that QR code and call to action is specifically around supporting the funding right now for the school library bills, because while Senator Camilleri has it in the Senate budget, there's nothing for school libraries in the House budget or the governor's budget. So when the groups meet, the House, the Senate, and the governor, they're going to have to negotiate the differences in those. And so I would love to see that funding remain. And so if you would also like to see that funding remain, you can use that call to action, that QR code there. It's really simple to put in your name and your address, and click, it'll send off the email to the correct key stakeholders there that we need to contact. So
Thanks, Kathy. I also wonder, would you speak to this question spotlighted right now? What's the time frame for the life of these bills?
I guess I'm not. So, if they don't pass this session, they would have to be introduced again, because the legislature is on a 2-year schedule, and this schedule was 2022, 2020, no, 2023, 2024. So if they don't pass in 2024, they would have to be reintroduced again later. If they are passed, then, like I mentioned, I believe they would be updated to make the timeline for implementing them a little bit longer, because there's some issues with 2025 having them that all in place. So I do feel, but once they're passed, they're part of the law until the legislators would change it again. So we would have that. And there are a lot of other states that do have these types of requirements in their state law for school libraries and school librarians in their state's law. So Michigan wouldn't necessarily be the first state to have that kind of requirement. So yeah. So in fact, we base some of the language on some other states that already do have language like this.
Thanks, Kathy. Roger put something that he's empowered by to come to the library and read more often and feel empowered to expose and recommend more people to the library. That reminds me a little bit of what Leah was saying about how you're building community by, talking to others about the books you're reading and sharing about that. Thanks, Roger. Does anyone else on the call have any closing thoughts?
Something I'd like to add is referring to what Roger had said, that it really does empower you to feel like you're as well making the change as seeing the change around you, and seeing people become more cultured by reading books. And not only just really knowing the history behind a lot of these things that are impacting society today, or have impacted society.
Thanks, Noah.
I also have something to say.
Go ahead,
I
Leah.
totally agree with Rogers and how he feels entire. I also feel the same way. But to be honest, I do feel a bit sad and a bit jealous, because this is my last year at UPrep with the library. And I'm very happy to see how far it came so far. I mean, how far it is right now. But I'm jealous because everybody else gets to see how far it will go in the future and all the things that it will be. So I'm sad and jealous, but I'll make sure to visit if I can.
Leah, where are you? Can you remind everyone where you're going to university next year?
I'm going to MSU.
They have a great library. You're going to be in good hands there. So congratulations, and thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations and good luck. I hope that it goes amazingly, and enjoy that library, certainly. I want to echo Karen Liston from our Facebook viewers, and thanking everyone for being here. I appreciate your time, your expertise, your thoughts, your wisdom. And this is such a great team of people to continue this conversation. So please join us and keeping the conversation going. Talk to your community members about libraries, bring attention to this issue. Feel free to reach out to 313 Reads if you want to talk a little bit more about this. We're going to have this posted on all of our channels afterwards, as well as we will be posting resources on all of our social media feeds too.
Mhm.
So we look forward to continuing to educate and advocate with you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, my students, for coming. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you, students.
Thank you, students. Yeah.
Bye and have a good day.